Greetings, beloveds. This is Amy Caryn Johnson, the Earth Channel. I am here again with the fifth in the series on channels in human design and compromises. If you haven't watched any other videos before, I encourage you to go back and check those out because I give a little bit more of an introduction in those. Human design is an astrology-based system, so if you don't have your chart already, I encourage you to go and get one at any free chart creator. The one I often recommend is humandesignamerica.com/chart, and use noon if you don't know your birth time and start from there. I am available for conversations about rectification if needed. So excuse any background noise you might hear. My dog is enjoying a bone right now. But I do want to talk to you today about the eclipse chart, and I will share that with you. Last week we talked about the Mercury Retrograde chart, and the week before that we talked about the lunar eclipse chart. This week on June 10th, we will be experiencing the solar eclipse, partial solar eclipse. And even though it happens on Wednesday, I'm pretty sure that you're all feeling all of these eclipse energies for at least this month or so, if not 2 months potentially. It's pretty intense. I personally have possibly lost all the work I've been doing for about 9 months on a new website that I've been working on. So I am disappointed in that about that. But I know that it'll turn out whatever way it's supposed to. If I was meant to create a completely different new website, then that will be what happens. One way or another, it will work out. And so I'd like to focus a little bit on what this eclipse has to teach us and show us about control or letting go of control. The channel in particular I would like to focus on is the 3536 channel. And as you can see in the eclipse chart, it is defined partially with red, partially with black. The red is unconscious, the black is conscious. And same with your chart. If it's a combination of red and black stripes, then it's both. If it's white, it's undefined. And I have lots of other videos talking more about that, so I encourage you to go back and look at those. And this one I wanted to focus on because it is connected from the emotional center, the brown triangle on the right, to the throat center, the square at the top. I'll have it circled in the chart. And the throat is highlighted during this time with especially the Mercury retrograde, although the eclipse also occurs in another gate in the throat, which is the 45th gate, where the sun, the moon, and Mercury are for the eclipse. And I'll have that circled as well. But this full channel is the one that is completely defined as opposed to the 4521. And so I wanted to focus on the full channel. Mercury will be retrograding even farther back into the 35th gate as well, which is, like I said, in the throat center. So this has a lot to do with our expression, and of course my website is an expression of mine. There were many of my words there, as well as links to many of my videos. So definitely has to do with expression. Of course, Mercury retrograde can cause problems with technology as well, which my website relates to. Another theme of the 35th gate is experience, and sometimes with that can be associated some boredom when we're not accessing the full expression of that energy. I have this full channel personally defined in my chart, my birth chart, and I have sort of seen, especially since this one for me is fully conscious, how other people experience that energy from me especially when they only have one gate defined. And when someone else only has one gate and another person has the full channel defined in that channel, that is where the one gate is, that is what is called a compromise, as I have said before. And it can feel anywhere from, maybe at best, the person who has just the one gate defined, like an interruption in their process when someone comes along with that whole channel. At worst, it can feel kind of like you're stepping on their toes, or it's just uncomfortable and potentially even oppressive a little bit, without it necessarily being something anyone intends for you to feel. The full channel has to do with experiences, in particular expressing our emotional experiences, since it is connected to the emotional center. And with all channels connected to the emotional center, there is a wave. This one builds rather slowly as you seek certain experiences, and then once you have either achieved that experience that you were seeking, or you have failed to achieve it and you've come to the point where you feel like you have to give up, perhaps, that's when the wave sort of comes crashing down. And obviously that can feel not so good, especially the first several times that you experience that sort of thing. And if you have either one of these centers open, undefined, white in your chart, or you have just one of the gates even, if you are around someone who's experiencing that wave like I do sometimes, then you might amplify it, especially with the centers, especially with the emotional center being open or undefined. When you're around someone who has it defined and has this channel defined, then you could amplify that particular wave, and it could feel really good as you're seeking the experience and maybe even having the experience, but then it can feel even worse afterwards when you sort of come crashing down, or that person comes crashing down and you're amplifying that feeling. So let's get to control. I'm having to release the notion that I am in control of my website, for example. And I personally am not experiencing a huge crash right now because I'm not at the deadline I had set for myself to have that website completed. I still have time, and I believe that I can either rectify it at some point, maybe after the Mercury retrograde is over, or I can come up with a better, perhaps more simplified website that will address my needs. I've done it before. I know I can do it again, even faster this time. So even though there may be a bit of a dip in my emotional wave around the troubles I'm having at the moment, I am following the philosophy and the advice of the I Ching and the Tao and the Way. All ways lead to the way is what is generally considered to be a truth within the I Ching and the Tao. And all of the 64 hexagrams in the chart that I've been sharing with you come from the I Ching, the Book of Changes. And there is a certain amount of detachment that they also advise in all things. There are cycles, and in my interpretation of human design and the I Ching, the way these are overlaid, I do it a little differently than other people. I leave the hexagrams where they are and were when they were originally channeled, which is they were originally channeled according to the tropical zodiac, or the zodiac that Western astrologers use. But then I take the 12 signs of the zodiac and I rotate them to fit the sidereal alignment. And most people either stick with all tropical or all sidereal, not this combination that I use. So this eclipse is happening in the sign of Taurus and the nakshatra, if you're familiar with those, of Mrigashira. I've heard other ways of pronouncing that. It's a little bit of a difficult one. And Mrigashira has to do with seeking. I talked a little bit about Taurus last week being the natural second house and having to do with our resources that we need for survival. That is still the case with this eclipse as well and this theme. So perhaps we're seeking those resources we need for survival. I don't personally depend upon my website for a living at this time. Not yet anyway. I have a full-time job that supports me, and that might be another part of why I'm not freaking out too much about the problems I'm having with my website. And so I would encourage you all to, whatever creative endeavors you might pursue in your lives, don't always necessarily depend upon them for your living, for your survival. That's really too much pressure to put on our creativity. Our creativity wants to be expressed without limitations. And so perhaps we need to hold on to those more grounded, more, maybe even third dimensional might be an accurate description for the types of jobs that we need just to put, food on the table sort of concerns. And so I would encourage you all to consider the ways that you can support yourself in the ways that you need to, and find ways to express your creativity in whatever ways seem best for you, and to reach out to the cosmos. We have many sources of support in our world and in our universe, and I believe that is where our creativity comes from. It is the force, the source, the divine seeking to be expressed through us. And we are part of that as well ourselves. So it is only an illusion that we seem separate from it at any time. But we are all here incarnated in physical bodies this lifetime in order to express one or another aspect, maybe multiple aspects of that greater love that is all that is. Newt's getting a little drink there. And so what I believe the gifts that come from both astrology, sidereal astrology, sometimes Western and Vedic or tropical, whatever type of astrology you like to use, they all show us different aspects. Personally, with my interpretation, I believe that the I Ching, those 64 hexagrams, help to ground some of those cosmic energies into our physical world. And while I do believe we are ascending and making our way through the fourth and into the fifth dimensions, those still have physical qualities to them. So these hexagrams, these gates, as they're called in human design, will still continue to help ground the cosmic energies into our physical realms, into those dimensions. So that's what I believe is we gain through my interpretation of this particular type of human design. Also, I mentioned last week entrainment. And I believe that the hexagrams help to entrain us, help to meet us where we are, give our minds something to focus on as to that bridge that connects us from the physical into the cosmic, universal, and ethereal realms. Newt wants to share his bone with all of you and with us right now, that experience. And in addition to entrainment, I wanted to bring up today the concept of coherence. This system of astrology and human design helps to make what can seem like the chaos of our experience more coherent, help it to make sense, help our minds to see the beauty and the patterns in the way that even those things that we have no control over can hold gifts for us if only we can see them and receive them in that way. appreciate them in that way. So I hope that that's what you begin to gain when you watch these videos. And as always, I am going to channel a message from Gaia as well, Mother Earth. One of the neat things I realized recently, too, with Vedic astrology and combining it with human design is the fact that with the nakshatras, they have elements like the 12 signs of the zodiac do. But there are 27 nakshatras. Sometimes they're called the moon signs, but they do apply to these sub-constellations within each of the 12 signs and all of the planets as they transit through those. But one of the bigger differences between the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 27 nakshatras, which I'm sorry, I'm not going to have a graphic ready to share with you to show you what those might look like overlaid as well. But they have only 3 elements associated with each one of those: water, fire, and wind, or air would be another way of seeing the wind element. And so that's another way that I believe that the hexagrams of the I Ching help to ground those energies. The nakshatras are seen as, in a lot of ways, the inner kernel of truth within that particular area of each of those 12 signs of the zodiac. And so it's even, more of the essence from the stars, from the heavens, and then we bring in that element of earth as we translate it through those gates of human design. One last thing before I channel the message from Gaia for today is that these birth charts that we get with human design are really just a starting point for all of us. With these messages, I'm hoping to help you see how you can access any of these energies anytime you want, if you can just open to them and receive them from many different sources. Obviously, we want to focus on benevolent sources, and there are plenty of those. But there is a beauty to your birth chart, and it sort of helps you to see why you came here. And yet, we can all expand our sense of identity beyond these physical bodies that we were born with, and thereby, as we begin to associate ourselves with wider and wider circles of being, fields, our higher selves, even up to our oversouls, which go up into the highest dimensions, we can easily access any of those energies that we would like to at any time. The gift of being incarnated here in physical bodies is that we get the chance to look at these energies in little slices, little aspects. And I know that oftentimes when people haven't found the gift in each of those aspects yet, they can feel like bad aspects, but my personal view is that there are no bad aspects. And that fits with the philosophy behind the Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. I encourage you to check that work out. My work is a little bit of a departure and a different take on some things, but he does provide us with a way of seeing each of those aspects, not just for the place where they start in the most separated, most dualistic way possible, but that each of them have a gift and then a highest expression, which he calls the Siddhi. And all of them have that potential. So that's why I don't believe that any of the aspects in and of themselves are bad in any way. They have ways that they can be expressed more with the belief of separation from Source, God, the divine, and those can make them feel kind of crummy sometimes, but there is always a way to transmute them. Okay, so Gaia's message always helps us to see the higher aspects of those as well, higher expressions, and helps us to access those different energies too. So let's hear what she has to share with us today. I invite you to connect with me. Take a few deep breaths. Close your eyes if you'd like. So Gaia would like to remind us all that we do have free will, and yet we are not omnipotent. We have a certain amount of control over some things, and very little to no control over many other things. And a big reason for that has to do with the fact that we are in physical realms still, physical dimensions, third, fourth, or fifth. They're all somewhere in that spectrum within the physical definition. And we are all able to create our reality, and yet we are not quite yet all fully at the point of being a cohesive collective yet. And so our physical reality has a momentum to it right now still. And it cannot be all undone at once. That would be highly destructive, highly disruptive, and highly disconcerting to all of us if it were all to change so suddenly. And so we are all being given, excuse me, clearing the throat chakra. We are all being given the opportunity to slowly expand our skills of manifestation. One thing Amy forgot to mention was that this channel, the 3536 channel, is one of the channels of manifesting. It's a manifesting channel. And it shows the way, like the channel that she talked about last week, the 1222, helps bring our emotions into our reality. Whatever we feel strong emotion around or about becomes part of our reality. And so it becomes very important to find at least aspects of every part of our reality for which we can be grateful and appreciate, because that will help them to grow. That gives them that emotion to help them grow, just like water helps flowers to grow. And then that reality will become more and more of the reality and gain momentum immediately around you, and then expand a bit further and a bit further until other people can appreciate it and help it to grow around them as well. But when we interact with other people, we do enter into a little bit of their reality as they enter into ours, and they mix, and that can be an interesting combination sometimes. And it's always great to experience new things. It challenges us to find those things that we can appreciate that we may not have considered before as being wonderful aspects that we might want to incorporate into our reality. And even at first, if we experience them in a bad way, we can sometimes later begin to see the gift, the higher expression of that aspect. And as we all slowly ascend through the fourth and into the fifth dimension, the turnaround of our manifestations, whatever we put our energy into, whatever we put our emotion into, will become faster and faster. And that's why we need to use these opportunities, while it's still a little slower, to really hone in on what makes us feel good. And not just in our physical reality, but those intangible things. We can feel good for no reason at all. And the more you can appreciate feeling good just for the feeling's sake itself, the more you will be able to manifest this great feeling in your reality, no matter what, because then you will be more open to that feeling coming from many different aspects. And you will be able to be delighted and surprised when all these different aspects come together, and you can still feel great. You can still feel happiness. You can still feel contentment and love no matter what. Because in truth, there is no separation. We can always feel love. We can always connect with our higher selves, our true selves, that light within us that never dies and can never be harmed or feel pain. And it is that contrast between the perceived physical reality, where we have less control, and then awakening to the possibility that we always have control over how we feel. Once we connect with that eternal part of ourselves, that contrast makes it all the more enjoyable, all the more wondrous. And so Gaia invites you to open yourselves to that possibility in each and every moment. Deep breath. Let go of that which no longer serves you. Let the love in. Let that love come from yourself. Let that love come from your helpers, your guides, your angels, your heavenly beings, your heavenly sources, as well as Gaia herself and all the helpers we have here. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste, beloveds. Thank you for watching, subscribing, liking, sharing, and clicking the bell button to be notified when the new weekly message comes out.